Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Eugene Aguikoro. Welcome to our Rijk Zwaan webinar, and what we call prevention is better than cure. And today we want to focus on virus and the vectors. And I'm in this studio with my colleague, Clement.
Yeah, Clement Onoja, you are going to have a very good webinar on viruses, so just sit back and enjoy.
Yes, also in this studio, I'm with my colleague, Marcos.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Marcus Burnett, part of the crop management team of Sub-Saharan Africa, and I'm really excited to be here for this webinar.
Great. Another colleague is Harold Peters. Please, Harold.
I'm good morning or good afternoon, better. I'm Harold Peters, client and business manager, business development manager for Sub-Saharan Africa, based in Tanzania, Arusha, but traveling all over Africa and supporting my colleagues here.
Thank you very much, Harold. And in this time, let me just tell you that I will take care of the introduction, and after that, the viruses, the starting point of the virus, how the virus get into the crop, scouting, early detection of the virus is very important, and prevention measures. And then at the end, we're going to make a wrap-up and find Q&A together with myself, Clem, and Marcus. And moderator today will be Harold in this session. Thank you very much. In the introduction, let me tell you that we started already in July 2024. We come up with Afaja, Luleza, and later we come with Mawenzili. This variety has been very good to you. You get a lot of yield, but still we observe that there's something that we can tackle on to give you more insight how you maximize our variety. And why we're talking at all about virus, why does the virus matters? The impact of the virus on the crop is so huge that the yield loss can even go from 20 to 90%, depending on the virus, depending on the stage of the plant, and also the vector pressure that you have in your field. The quality of the fruit is reduced. The economic impact on the cultivation and the treatment, the money you are spending to really control the virus is quite an important part that we need to take care of. The vulnerability of the several crops to the viruses are also very important. Several vectors, what we call vector, you are going to learn more about it today, and the cropping, the intensive cropping session that we want to teach you in this package. And the objective at all of this is to present the main pest and the disease and the control method that we're going to advise. We want to provide you with the insight into vector and virus relationship. What does it mean? Okay, and lastly, we would like to use this common viruses, vector combination of habanero peppers as a model to explain some principle that you can learn, also applied in different crops. This is very important. As you can see, let's have a special focus, for instance, on the viruses and the vector. Which one is called vector? The insect. But the insect can produce direct damage on the crop, but at the same time, the virus is also, the vector is bringing you viruses, diseases on your plant. The insect damage the plant, but also bringing a problem, the viruses. And we call it viruses. If you look at the viruses, are primarily transmitted by thrips. Which are they? Tomatoes spotted with viruses, capsicum chlorosis viruses, etc. There are many on this, but these are the tomato spotted wilt viruses becoming more and more important, we discover in our diagnostic across Sub-Saharan Africa. The other vector, very important vector that is affecting production is aphid. Aphid transmitted different viruses, especially potiviruses, as the major threat for production of pepper. When I'm talking to pepper, globally, production is very affected by this aphid, and the aphid are bringing different viruses, CMV being the #1 prevalent. In most of our sampling, Sub-Saharan Africa, CMV become more prevalent. You can see it in almost all the field. PVY potato virus Y, and also we have the pepper venereal mottle viruses, and polioviruses are coming also more and more. We've seen them, okay. And there is another group of vector, which is I'm talking about now the white flies, which bring the begomoviruses. You know, the vector is white fly, but bringing begomoviruses. In the class of begomoviruses, we have the tomato yellow leaf curl, which is mainly tomato, but affecting also seriously peppers. We have the pepper yellow leaf curl viruses, different of them chili leaf curl viruses. Okay, so these are different category: the vector, the insect, and the virus that they carry along. Okay, so this is very important to know. And for instance, here, curative treatment, it does not exist. There is nothing you can do. If you get it done on your plant, if it's there already, it's difficult to get rid of it. So it's impossible to cure or to treat against plant viruses. Okay? Infected plants usually do not recover, and keeping them in the production can be very costly and not very efficient. Look at it now, for instance. If you look at this circle, red one, if you don't look at it closely, you don't know this plant is already affected, but look nice from outside. So it's very important to pay attention, and often the infection is present long before. It's there long before the grower notices. It is too late most of the time when the symptoms are very obvious and very widespread. So it started early on, but most people don't know it. Through this presentation, you will learn to know how to differentiate. Look at it now. If you have a plant very much affected, look at the fruit, even completely damaged. What can you do? It's already too late. Since it is impossible to cure a virus-infected plant, prevention is the only option. Integrated pest management, the IPM, to control insect vector responsible for the viruses, infection, help to minimize yield loss and economic consequences that go with it. So we advise you to start with resistant variety, healthy seedling, healthy seed, very important, healthy seedling, good agricultural practices, in combination of IPM, minimize the yield loss, and also you can get good income out of your production. So this is very important to notice, okay? So you know the economic importance of habanero at all, you know it very well. It's a high value crop in the tropical region. Don't talk about West Africa, Senegal, Ghana, Nigeria, Benin, Cote d'Ivoire. In all this area, even in East Africa, it's a very important crop economically. Yield is huge, but if you don't take care of some parameter, you cannot make it. Year-round production is also possible on the tropical climate. Of course, losses can even exceed 70%. Sometimes it go to 90%. So you don't want to grow a crop but then you cannot harvest anything. So to prevent that, I would like to invite my colleague Onoja to take care of this part now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. As my colleague has laid the groundwork for and introduced the topic, how do viruses enter the crop? We have realized that viruses are really very important and can cause economic damage. But we need to know how they enter the crop, since they are vectors, so to say they are transmitted by vectors. Okay, so viruses are obligate organisms, meaning that they cannot live on their own. They need another organism to be able to reproduce and replicate. Okay, and these viruses are able to move around through a lot of channels, including insect vectors, including mechanical transmission, and also by planting material. Okay, so it's good to know exactly how they move around so that you can, just as my colleague had mentioned earlier, approach the subject in the best way. But there are also some other beneficial insects. We talked about insects being able to transmit viruses. There are some non-vectors in the field, like the bees, for instance. and ladybugs on the field, those don't transmit, except they take the material, which is maybe debris that is already transmitted, and they take it to the plant. Okay, so and when they do that, the virus can enter through a number of channels, which also includes like if you find the plant that already has injury or wound, those are channels that it can enter through. So it's good, while we talk about insects being vectors, it's also good for you to note that not all insects on the field are vectors in their own right. There is a cycle of inoculation when you're talking about viruses. And as we mentioned earlier, viruses occur in nature. They occur in nature a lot of the time through hosts in the environment, alternate hosts in the environment. So you can easily find that in your field where you have weeds in the environment, then you can also find alternative sources of inoculum there. When the inoculum occurs in such a manner, the vectors, which are these insects that thrive in the environment as well, can easily pick it up from there and take it to your plant. Don't forget that in transmission of viruses, you need to look at the disease triangle. The disease triangle, which talks about the environment, which is going to, you have the environment, you have the plant, and you also have the virus, which is virulent. Okay, so if in that manner, it's easy for it to transmit because all the conditions necessary for disease transmission can be met. Therefore, it is very possible for you to note that the critical window for you to prevent viruses usually is seedling stage. So between the seedling to the flowering stage, if there is infection at this stage, it usually can lead to maximum loss at that stage. Now, as we mentioned earlier, we saw the effect of viruses, in different types of viruses, just like the thrips, which transmits TSWV notably, especially in West Africa. And you can see from this diagram here, this plant, usually you notice this chlorotic patch and the chlorosis showing on it with multicolors on the leaf. It doesn't only affect only the leaf, you can also find the effect also on the fruits. So at the end of the day, you get a fruit in the market which is not marketable at all. So it is really, really very important to note this and to take care of the plant and ensure that you don't have that kind of issue on the plant. Thrips transmit TSWV, but in transmitting TSWV, there are ways that it transmits it, okay? And it's transmitted by the adult. However, in transmitting by the adult doesn't acquire the infection. It is the instalarva that affects it. So if you are going to, if you want to prevent for this, then you need to know the life cycle, and you need to know the biological behavior and the biological behavior of the insect or the vector in the environment. Now, as we've been talking a lot about thrips, because thrips is really very important, and farmers have seen the effects, especially in tropical wet conditions like West Africa. Okay, and for thrips has a very short life cycle, where if the temperature is warm, then it begins to multiply, repeatedly. So you can find thrips population from the egg stage up to the adult stage. Within 10 days, you can see an explosion in your field. Okay, and another very important thing that we also need to note is that thrips can produce by sexual means and also by asexual means. Okay, so it's something that you really need to note. And why do you really need to know this? Because the life cycle is really very important. For instance, the pupa stage of the thrips is usually not on the plant. At this stage, it does not feed anymore. The pupa stage is usually in the soil. Therefore, if you have, as we mentioned earlier, the approach to control thrips is only not by totally by chemical, but you need to combine all the control measures for managing pests in the farm, which is an integrated pest management approach. And these are further damages which you can see in the plants and on the fruits, which would totally make the crop to be unacceptable in the market. So you can see that thrips is something that you shouldn't play with, okay, as a farmer, because in just a very short period of time, within 30 days, the life cycle ends, but it can totally truncate your production. Another very important vector is the aphid. And aphid has a whole lot of, it has a pest complex of diseases that it transmits, including the CMV, which is really, really very important. The CMV is really very important for the aphids. Also, the pepper venal mottle virus disease as well is also one of the diseases that it transmits. But in the case of aphids, just like the thrips, also has a sexual mode of reproduction as well. But aphids are really, they have their time of reproduction is really shorter, and also they have this honeydew effect. They excrete on the crop, making the leaf surface of the crop to have moldy surface. So you will find that it would also now prevent photosynthesis, and apart from transmitting the virus. Aphids are really, really dangerous because the transmission mode is within seconds. They have acquired it. Within minutes, it has been transmitted. And you can see some of the damage which it has caused. Okay, these are some of the damages which aphids can actually cause. Why are we telling you all this? Because when you know what the problem is, then you will know how to tackle the problem when dealing especially with viruses. Another vector which transmit viruses is the whitefly, which is mostly found during the drier periods of the year in our environment. And it also has devastating effects as well, because the population can explode, in just a very short period of time as well. And for the whiteflies, you can easily notice and see viruses like tomato leaf curl, yellow leaf curl virus disease as one of the diseases that it can transmit. How do you observe and how can you take care of the whiteflies when you find them in your farm, for instance? Now, and that's the next thing that we're going to be talking about, because as we mentioned earlier, if you want to control this pest and disease, the IPM approach is the only approach with which you can control it. That means that you must combine the cultural methods, the biological methods. You must also look at the chemical methods, and then you must also look at the mechanical methods of control as well. That would involve all the factors of control which are at your disposal, and as much as possible, you avoid the chemical approach as the last point of call. Okay, so what does that entail? What does that tell us? That tells us that in protecting our crop against viruses, we need to have a preventive plan and a proactive plan in place so that you can balance the economic threshold of the vectors in the environment and prevent minimum damage to your crop. Okay, so there is another one which is not a virus, which is the viroids also, but it behaves similarly like the virus in that it also doesn't have a cure. And if you find it in the field, the best thing, it can manifest in different ways, but you find the plant being stunted and you just see that no more flowers on the plant and growth has been truncated. Then you're looking at viroids. And the best thing to do in that case is to remove the plant and burn the plant. All right. So that's that. And how do we manage the viruses and the viroids?
Thank you very much, Clem, for this. I think, yeah. Yes, very importantly, Clem mentioned about the viroid. And I believe it's different than the viruses. The viroid are RNAs that not code for a protein, but very pathogenic to the plant. How does it work? The plant becomes stunted, and you cannot do anything out of it. The best is to remove. And in the next slide, I will explain it more. And how to control now? The control is through the vector to minimize the effect. You have to know that when the virus is already affected the plant, it becomes difficult. So you can break the cycle of the infection by controlling more of the vector, of the insect, okay? So to start with, well-protected nursery, so that can help you to have a healthy seed to start with, like a Rijk Zwaan seed. When you have it, nurses in a good nursery, so that you can very much have a healthy seedling. Remove of the weed around because weed can be the host that is hosting the viroid in this case. Prevention measures are very important. Crop rotation, disinfection, movement of the people around the farm is also very important. Protection and after planting when condition allows. It's very important to train the staff, monitoring, reporting. You have to really put in place different methods, procedures that can help you to control the movement, that will allow your farm to be clean, so that you can maximize the yield as much as you can. So, the management technique, prevention is the best. We already said scouting, early detection, using yellow sticky trap. Yellow sticky trap, yeah, that can attract aphid and white flies, for instance, while the blue are more targeted to the thrips. So these are different things that you can use to monitor the vector population. Okay? Very important that you have to also, if, as Clem presented, it's good to know the symptoms of the plant. If you don't know the symptom, you think that your field is clean, but it's not clean. So seeing a vector, most people don't make the connection, but you have to really know the scouting. Oh, this discoloration is just normal, it's not normal. How do I do it? It means that I have a big population already in my farm. So prevention is best, we already said it. So the scouting, we propose here, for instance, different scouting. You can do it diagonally, one in the beginning, in this line, and also it makes X pattern, or zigzag, M form. You go on your farm and then you go zigzag way, or you go diagonally, or you go in circle, like what we show in this picture. It's very important to know this, okay? And the sticky trap, I already mentioned it. Yellow one, the yellow is meant for more of the aphid and so on. And it's very important to have this combination to have it. When you have it, it helps you to monitor what is going on in your field. And also, you can also have this different color, yellow, red, green. When you have it as a control pattern, you put it in spotted where you see the first infestation. It helps you to be on control, so that you can really make sure that you're okay. The effectiveness of spraying is also important. For instance, you have as you can see, this guy is spraying, but the volume, just suppose that he starts from a 300 liter, big bomb of prepared solution to spray, but he can waste a lot of them in the part that will drift away, or the target one, just few, the part of it is drift off. So you can avoid that by doing what? You need to have a proper, spraying, higher pressure. The finer the droplet, the better you have the result. If you have a bigger droplet, you just help the plant. Most of them will drip off and fall down on ground while you need it on the plant. So the finer droplet is the best to help, and the pressure as well. Look at this now, the size of the droplet. If you look at the edge of this leaf, most of the thing are concentrated on the edge and will drop off. So you are spraying, you are bringing a lot of effort, but you are not making much benefit out of your spraying. So it's very important to know that. Okay? Safety measure, I think I will let Clem to come in that. Okay? Can you come in?
All right,
Yeah.
thank you, Dr. Eugene. So while you are spraying your crop, always note that if you choose to use the chemical control measures, you need to look at the mode of action group in applying pesticides. And this is simply because you want to prevent as much as possible the target organism from developing resistance to it. So in preparing your pest management protocol, always note that the arrangement of your pesticide should be such that the mode of action groups are different. For instance, if you spray something that is probably a sodium modulator, the next thing you want to spray will be another pesticide that is in a different group, maybe a neonicotinoid or something like that. That's way you are able to really manage the pest at all. And also, in Africa, we always forget about, we are quick to just enter the field and then spray. But it is usually advised that in spraying, as much as possible, try to protect yourself while you are spraying. That means that avoid unnecessary inhaling of the spray, because it could cause hazardous effects to the body. And also, lots of the pesticides can also permeate through the skin and enter the body, causing either acute toxicity or long-term toxicity, chronic toxicity. Okay, so endeavor to have protective clothing and also avoid to spray, avoid inhaling it. Usually, if you want to spray to the wind, the way the wind is blowing, the pressure is also something that you also note. And don't spray against the wind. Spray, on the other side of the wind to prevent inhaling it that much. All right. Another thing too that we also need to note is that there is the pesticides that you wish to use in your protocol. Always start with pesticides that have a longer pre-harvest interval, and end with those that have a shorter pre-harvest interval, because at the end of the day, you are producing for the entire community and you want to avoid health situations. Okay, and that is something that we really need to talk about, because in the market these days, the pesticide, the chemicals in the crops, in the final product are usually so much so that it's sometimes above the threshold for consumption. Okay, and we also like to point out to you that these are some of the pepper crops which we have in our assortment, some of which you already know, like Faja and Loleza, the yellow, and also Mawenzili. Thank you very much, and now we'll take questions.
Okay, thank you. That's quite a webinar here. Marcus, you have been traveling around in Africa for decades now. What's your take on this? What's your take home on habanero growing and the issues that we discussed here?
Thanks, Harold. Indeed, there was a lot to take out of the conversation, and I was relating it, in fact, to my traveling. And I recall a situation earlier this year where I was in one of the West African countries. We visited a habanero farm, and it was very clear the farmer had really put in a lot of investment. There was really strong plants, there was staking of the plants, there was mulch, there was drip irrigation. But then something really unhappy occurred. Aphids came in from the bush on the side. And this farmer hadn't noticed that aphids had come onto his peppers, to the point where the population of the aphids exploded. And Clem alluded to this, that how quickly aphids can reproduce, because a female aphid is born carrying her granddaughters. So within a few days, the population simply explodes, to the point that the leaves of the plants were completely covered in honeydew and sooty mold. They were black, which Clem also alluded to earlier. So this farmer missed that. And that is the moment that scouting would have helped. The next thing that crept in is that that farmer didn't realize that the aphids were carrying a virus, and he didn't know the symptoms of the virus. So those first plants that were attacked by the aphid very quickly started to show symptoms of the virus. He didn't recognize the symptoms. So the education in attending such a webinar to recognize the symptom would have been an important point. And that would have been the moment also to remove that infected plant, take it away from the field, remove the source of the infection. This farmer didn't do that. And then the next point of attention. The farmer didn't know that that particular virus was spread as easily by fingers and hands and tools as it is by aphids. And therefore his workers and he himself started to spread the virus in the field all the way down. And that's where disinfection and sanitation practices would have helped this farmer a lot. And the consequence was almost 90% of that field was infected after the second flush with virus. And that farmer missed out on the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh flush because of that issue. And so I think that this webinar presented by Eugene and Clem highlighted all of those steps, right? Yeah. From understanding what the problem could be, scouting, identifying, removing, sanitation. A lot of problems could have been avoided. So I really took that as a takeaway from this today.
There's one question here that ties in with that. That is, how far do you remove host plants away from your farm or your greenhouse that are known host plants for the vectors?
It's a good question. I'm not sure that I've got a really specific answer as to how many meters it could be, but a lot of these insects are quite small, and thrips, for example, can blow with the wind. So it's a question of how far away is the next closest host plant. They can't jump 3 meters, but the wind can carry them.
Yeah.
And I think very important with aphids is that once the aphids have only got one winged life cycle, one winged stage in their life cycle where they travel. Once they're there, they stay there on that particular plant. They don't move. So the distance from the field, maybe 3 meters, I'm guessing. Maybe a bit of a spraying of the edge of the field, I'm guessing. But don't rely on that. Rely on your scouting. Pay attention to your crop.
Yeah. Is it an idea to keep that host plant away a bit from the farm and wait until the trips are there and then spray that host plant instead of your own?
That's a tactic that many people do. Yeah. They call it a trap crop.
Trap crop.
So you take a plant that you know is susceptible, for example, to whitefly. Whiteflies love eggplants, aubergines. So you plant a few of them on the edge, and you monitor those, and you really take care of those. Yeah. That's one way to do it, indeed.
Then there is also a question on if your field or your greenhouse has been infected, how long do you have to wait for a next crop, or is there a way that you can get rid of a virus in a crop?
It depends.
In a ground.
It depends very much on the virus, and of course here today we're focusing on hot peppers, habanero hot peppers, but tomatoes, cucumbers have their own viral problems. Something like TSWV, tomato spotted wilt virus, spread by the thrips, can only be spread by the thrips. Clem highlighted the fact that the larvae are the ones that acquire the virus. The virus has to kind of, if you like, grow up and develop with the thrips, and only then will the adults transmit it. So if you don't have any of those stages in your greenhouse, you could go back in immediately. Yeah. But some other viruses that are connected, let's say like tobacco mosaic virus, or the new threat in tomatoes, the rugose virus, that can subsist for years on plant dust and debris in your greenhouse. Yeah. So it's really important, I think, pay attention during the crop to remove debris as much as you can, if that's one of your risks. And then to disinfect strings, disinfect things that are likely to touch the plant.
And disinfecting, can you also think about solarization? Is that
that's an option.
Effective way?
If you're working in a greenhouse and maybe maybe the hot peppers you're working out in the field, and that's obviously not
Yeah, it's
not
more
applicable.
difficult.
But we could make use of the heat of our sun, close up the greenhouse, and let the temperature really build up. That can have an effect on knocking back the vectors, because aphids, for example, they really need quite cool weather. You know, in the absolute heat of a 40-degree summer, you're not going to find a lot of aphids. They like the in-between time, so you can really knock them back.
Yeah. You touched on a lot of things. It's really understanding the insects cycles, the lifetime, how they interact, the virus interacts with the vector. So, yeah, lots to be understood. And I think our colleagues here have really done a great job to bring it all to light and bring all those connections there. So I don't know if you have time for one more question.
Sure, please.
Why can't you cure a plant that has been infected with a virus?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm not really a virology specialist, but it's something that's well known in plants, is that you can't overcome a virus. Once it's there, it's there. So, you know, hoping against hope that you can spray and recover a plant and make it grow again usually is not the case. The symptoms just get worse and worse and worse and worse. And indeed, the risk of spreading it to the rest of your crop is really where the real cost lies. As to the mechanism of why viruses can't be cured, I'm not sure. But you know, in humans, do we really cure viruses in humans? Normally what we do is we try and survive them. You know, we treat the symptoms and we get better from our cold or our flu. But we haven't killed the virus, we've just gotten better. And unfortunately, in the plant, most of the viruses, you don't get better. Or the plant doesn't recover to the point that the farmer still makes a yield. Maybe the plant survives, but the farmer doesn't survive.
Yeah, one of the other questions here is how to differentiate whiteflies and mite viruses in early stage, and what are the best chemicals to start treatment with. That is a question that I would, but I'm going to let you answer it.
You might have to repeat the question, because
the question is how to differentiate whiteflies and mites, the damage that you see first, and then in how to best chemically treat it.
Okay, so I assume we're talking about peppers.
In peppers, I hope, yeah.
And in mites, I assume we're probably talking about broad mites, because that's a very common issue. Broad mites in peppers are so small, they're even smaller than the red spider mites that we're used to seeing on leaves, that they are impossible to see with the naked eye. So as the question points out, the first thing you notice is the damage. And it happens really in the growing points. The broad mites sit deep in the growing points. And you start to see, in my mind, you know, the main vein of the leaf that runs down the center of the leaf. What I've observed over the years, one of the very early symptoms is that main vein becomes deformed. It becomes almost like a zigzag. It doesn't grow completely straight. And what happens after the next step is that you start seeing the small leaves becoming deformed as it goes. When it goes even further, the broad mites are actually eating away at the growing point. And they eat away the young, very, very fine young leaves of the growing point. They eat away the very small flower bud initials. And the plant ends up with a whole cluster of very small little flower buds, no leaves, and it's stuck. It's like an empty growing point. And if you're seeing that, I'm sorry to say it's already probably too late. But that's absolutely broad mite. That if you're seeing that kind of effect, you've ended up with broad mite. Mites, I believe, are quite easy to treat. There are a lot of good miticides out there, but you need to know that you need a specific compound for mites. You can't use a compound for, you know, another insect group or another pest group. You need a miticide. They are quite effective. They are easily available. They're sometimes overused, but that's not the problem, Harold. The problem is noticing on day one that you need to treat.
Again,
right?
Comes to
That's
scouting.
the issue. Scouting and recognizing the very early symptoms. You should be treating long before you get to that point where all the growing points are gone. Whiteflies, of course, are much easier because you can actually see the whiteflies. They're always under the underside of the leaves. You touch the plant and they come off in a cloud. And depending on the crop and depending on the whitefly, you can see some silvering damage. usually you see that sooty mold, that stickiness.
Also, yeah.
Yeah, so that's one of the differences. And again, you need the right compounds for whitefly. I don't give advice on that because that's not my field.
Yeah. Now, yeah, let's. Sorry, yeah, Eugene, you had
Yes, thank you very much.
an addition.
I think one of the questions that Marco answered, I want to come on that. Why can't we treat the viruses? This is a fact. We cannot treat them. But that's why a company like Rijk Zwaan will come with the resistant varieties. It's one of the solutions, one of the best. If you have a resistant variety, where we have in most of, for instance, if I take our red jet, when you have PVY01, you have a lot of package of resistance in there. If you start with those resistant, at least you are much more in control. That was something I want to add on that. You know, the resistant varieties, it will play a big role compared with just a variety that does not have the resistant package. Yeah.
Maybe good to say something about resistance, Harold and Eugene. That's true. Resistance, and it was mentioned earlier that for many viruses and many crops, it's the first point of action is look for a resistant variety. Unfortunately, in the habaneros, there's not much resistance to virus pest, unfortunately. But I think it's very important to understand that resistance is not immunity. Immunity means that you don't get the problem. It doesn't happen. But resistance means the ability to live with the problem, the ability to overcome it and to limit the infection. Susceptibility is that you get the problem and the problem takes over. So it happens quite often that there's a resistant variety and you see a symptom, you think, wow, it's not resistant. It's resistant because the symptom came and stayed. It didn't spread, particularly with the fungal resistances.
Okay, let's keep that as the last question here. Most of the questions we will answer and bring as an addition to the webinar. But if everything goes well, what is then the potential of our varieties here?
Oh, I think that's a question for Clem and Eugene that have lived in the field.
Okay, thank you very much, Harold, for that question. For any of the varieties which we have on the screen, either Afaja, Mawenzili, and Loleza, you can have a minimum of, with good practices, let me emphasize that, because good agronomic practices is the most important thing in the field to the farmer. You can get 3 kg, 3.5 kg in the open field. And if it's in the greenhouse, then you can even get much more. Sometimes we have farmers getting double digits as well, depending on your location, depending on the management practice, and your agronomic practice as well. So any of these varieties, Afaja, Mawenzili, or Loleza, is a game changer for farmers. We've seen it across Africa.
Thank you. Any additions from the team here?
Yeah, for me, the addition is just to look at it. You see, this is Mawenzili fruit. Look at it, how beautiful it is. Such a beautiful variety.
And you're a grower yourself.
I'm a grower myself, so it's amazing to have these varieties, you know. As Clem said, 5 kilo per plant in open fields is even possible. Thank you very much. I think this is one of the really economically viable plant beside tomato, but this is, even in the dry season, is the one, I would say this is the best. For the whole West Africa, I mean, I know it's happening, so I think I would like to encourage you, go on this variety, and then you will get best out of it, following all what we've said. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's call it a day then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. See you guys. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Yes, Clem. Congratulations.